Welcome to New Game Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name's Kenny.
Nolan here.
And this is episode 292. It is a director episode.
Rare.
It's back to back
Very
to back
fun.
of some unique, fun experiences all throughout this summer and beyond. But before we bring our director in to talk to him, I thought that we'd have really just an entire episode dedicated to Final Fantasy. So
Okay.
you already, if you've clicked on this episode, you know what the game is already. But I came across an article this week as I've just been living in Final Fantasy world, which is the world that I would like to live in.
You always live there.
I take breaks every now and again.
Ah.
But I came across an article ranking the best characters in the Final Fantasy franchise.
Ooh.
And I know that the three of us have varying histories with the series, and different, obviously I've been through all of them. Nolan and Kenny,
Yeah.
I don't think you've been through all of them,
No.
but you've been through a
No.
good amount of them.
Enough to answer this question that you're about to ask, yes.
Well, I'm not. I'm
Oh.
not going to ask you what your top 10 is. What I'd rather do is share with you their top 10 and just
yeah,
get your reactions on them.
Okay, because
Your-
it's probably
your general-
bad, but okay.
Your general
Yeah.
thoughts.
Okay. I'm sure my thoughts are going to be terrible. I'm going to be like,
Oh, always.
generic black mage isn't high enough up on the list or something stupid. I know who I
He's
am.
just talking about
class.
Final Fantasy. Just Final
Just get
Final
ready for
Fantasy. That's the characters. They don't
Okay.
have names. Okay, so number 10 starts with one that I think y'all are probably a little bit less familiar with, which is blasphemous, but it's from Final Fantasy VI. It's Celeste Cher. She is the protagonist of Final Fantasy VI. She's a super interesting character. There's a legendary opera scene that she is a part of in that game. It's the last one of that early classic Final Fantasy, right? 1 through 6 kind of, and then 7 takes it to a whole new thing. But it's where storytelling really became a thing, and Celeste was kind of that protagonist.
Why did I think her name was Terra or Tetra or something like that?
Wait,
Because I know
Terra-
that character. I
Right.
I love 6.
Wait, no, Tara Branford is from Final Fantasy VI, and maybe she's the protagonist, but Celeste...
Uh-oh.
Wait, no.
Dustin doesn't know anything about Final Fantasy. That's
Fraudulent.
I know that Final Fantasy, it has a little write-up. It says, Final Fantasy VI certainly isn't lacking in memorable protagonists or villains, which really makes it that much more impressive that Celeste Cher has arguably became the game's unofficial lead all these years later. So
Yeah,
you're right.
Okay.
Tara is is your main protagonist, but
Got you.
they've got Celeste from Final Fantasy VI here.
I think I remember this character, but not enough to
Yeah.
have an opinion on that.
Certainly wouldn't be in my top 10.
Yeah, that's kind of. I feel like that's a try hard answer. Is that number 10?
Yeah, number 10.
I know nothing about the character, but I love an epic opera scene. So just on principle, I'm going to be like, I'm really glad that she made it in.
Parasite Eve.
Number 9 is Lightning,
Yes, please.
which I am more familiar with. She is the pinkish-haired protagonist in Final Fantasy 13.
She's beautiful.
She is beautiful.
It's a terrible name.
It's Final Fantasy.
What, you want
Well,
her name to be Thundara?
It's a terrible name.
Okay, go Dustin.
Thundara. I mean, she is her whole shtick is protecting her sister. She's looking out for her sister. She's strong. She's fearless. She's determined. She gets a bad rap because people think that the game is too linear, and so she doesn't get brought into the limelight as much as some other characters. But I do think that she deserves to be in the top 10 because I think she's an awesome character.
She can step in my limelight. She's number 9? She
Yeah,
needs
number
to be
9.
number top 3. I love Lightning,
She's
and I
pretty
think
sweet.
this is way too low of a rating because she is strong, she's different, and most protagonists in this series you can't really describe that way. Maybe some, but
I'm going to disagree completely out of ignorance. I would rather have good opera than bad rap.
are you still talking about
So-
opera?
This guy knows nothing about Final Fantasy.
Okay.
And we'll continue that trend here with number 8, who is Balthier from Final Fantasy 12, one of my least favorite Final Fantasy games.
Interesting.
Balthier is just a human. The reason why I mentioned that is because in some of these games, even in our game that we played this week, there's some characters that aren't human. But Balthier is Han Solo.
Yes.
And people liked him because of his personality, and he acted and thought that he was the protagonist the whole time, and people like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's
He's got like
a weird one. Like, I don't care about Balthier. I get it. I know of him. I've played 12. I'm more familiar with it than certainly Kenny, but no.
he's got a supervillain name. Like,
But he's not.
you just can't be awesome when that's your name.
Number 7 is Tifa Lockhart from Final Fantasy VII.
Okay.
Yeah.
Look at y'all both nodding on that one.
Probably
Too low.
on the list.
Yeah, she needs to be up there. She fights with her fists. She's got a key part in the story. Everybody knows who Tifa and her friends are, and so I love Tifa. I've always loved Tifa. She is exceptional, but could be higher.
Yeah, it could be hard.
Number 6 from Final Fantasy X is a guy named Aaron. He is a samurai-like warrior with one eye closed and shades on, which only has one hand kind of crippled and the other with a massive sword. And then obviously plays a lot of key like story elements, both in the backstory and in the present story of Final Fantasy X. You got to experience him at least some this week. Do you think he deserves to be in number 6?
Yes. Yes on the list, and 6 sounds good.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. Kenny's shaking his head without saying anything.
Probably lower. No, you'll see that you saw this in my first play, but the whole I'm sticking my hand out the front of my arm. I know he's supposed to be crippled or something, but it looks ridiculous. Okay. Like, just tuck that business in.
Well, first of all, you just said I'm sticking my hand out the front. You got to listen to me now. You said sticking the hand out the front of my arm, which doesn't make any sense. And then secondly, we all stick our hand out the front of our arm, hopefully. And then
sometimes.
And then secondly, yes, I mean, it's an aesthetic, dude. It's an aesthetic.
It's a vibe.
It's a bad aesthetic. That's what I'm saying. It's a choice you made, and it's the wrong choice. I can dislike him for that.
All right. Number 5 is a character we all would agree deserves to be in the top 10, but as low as 5 from Final Fantasy VII, Cloud Strife.
Accurate.
Yeah.
Accurate.
He's sometimes overrated. I'll say it.
I mean, I'll let that be.
He's a really cool character. I love him.
He's layered.
Yes.
Layered.
Yes, top 10. 5, sure.
Okay. Number 4, Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII.
Yes. Better
Kenny,
character than Cloud.
Like that he's higher on the list than Cloud.
I do too.
Okay, y'all both did. His theme song, One Winged Angel, his long hair, his skinny vibe, and his Masamune, I believe is the name of his sword.
Such a cool, dynamic character.
Really good villain. Number 3, might be a surprise from Final Fantasy X, is Yuna.
Okay. Why? Why?
Why? I don't know. This says that I've always seen Yuna as the real protagonist in Final Fantasy X. Incredible empathy, compassion as appropriate character traits for a summoner who's willing to complete what is generally considered to be a suicide mission, and it goes on and on.
I like that, but top 10, maybe not. There's too many characters to squeeze her in there.
Yeah, it feels like to me.
Kenny, you're giving facials, but you're not giving verbals.
No, it feels high to me.
It's definitely high. She doesn't deserve to be in the top 10, and I love Precious Baby Yuna, but no. Number 2 is
title for her?
No, no, it's not official. Number 2 from Final Fantasy VI is Kefka Palazzo. He is the clown-like villain from Final Fantasy VI, kind of like Joker a little bit. Yeah. And from the Batman series, obviously, but he starts as somewhat unpowered, just an antagonist that's poking the bear, but then he gains power, and it's kind of like a horror-like villain. It's super interesting.
Kefka, love Kefka. 2 is too high, but top 10 for sure.
Agreed with you. And then finally, number 1 from Final Fantasy IX.
Yeah.
Is Vivi.
Really?
Black Mage, the cute, adorable, amazing Black Mage from Final Fantasy IX.
I can't disagree.
I told you that Black Mage wasn't going to be high enough up on the list.
That's so
The
funny.
Black Mage is number
Final
one.
Fantasy I,
I love.
it ended up working out. That's so funny.
I'll allow it.
Yeah, I'm sad that Sid didn't make the list. But
Which one?
Yeah, which?
yes, I would have just said like Sid, because
Yeah.
of the role of that character.
Yeah. Vivi's wonderful. So your problem is Sid's not on the list. Nolan, do you have? I mean, we've got a few problems, but do you think someone deserves to be on the list that's not there?
Probably, but I'm blanking. I just think
Okay.
Lightning should be in the top 5 for sure.
Okay, cool. I only have one problem with the list. The fact that Kate Sith isn't number 1 is an absolute sin. Like, I know some people see Kate Sith as a reject, but I think that is a conspiracy.
Okay.
Ooh, waka waka!
No.
Like in our retro game of the week, Final Fantasy X. Jordan, first and foremost, we'd love to welcome you to the podcast. Thank you for being here with us today.
Woo-hoo.
Thank you for your support, and thank you for allowing us to play Final Fantasy X this week. Introduce yourself to our listeners and share with us what brought you to New Game Plus in the first place.
Hey, I'm Jordan, or DDJR. It doesn't stand for junior, like a lot of people seem to think so. I was kind of bored at work one day, and I was just kind of scrolling through podcasts on my phone, and I was just looking at gaming podcasts, and I stumbled across one that had can't remember how many episodes, maybe about 200 and some change.
Okay.
It was maybe about 240, 250, and I was like, well, this will keep me occupied for many hours. So I would just listen while at work and on my breaks and whatnot, and I actually started from episode 1 and I just kind of continued. So I've listened to unless I somehow skipped one, I've listened to every episode.
Wow.
Okay, so the first episode that you ever listened to of us, was Earthworm Jim?
Yes.
Oh no.
It was very
Nope.
okay.
We were new. We didn't know what we were
We're
doing.
new
We
here, yeah.
arguably still don't, but we've made some strides. We'll say that.
That introduction was pretty good, though. I'll give it
Listen,
that.
I think we just laughed and in
We
bad
literally just
quality.
left through the episode.
Well, I'm glad that Earthworm Jim didn't send you away and that you're still here. After, so you finished the backlog then.
I have finished every episode unless I somehow skipped one, but
Right.
I've also gone back and listened to older episodes. I think I was on a 9-hour road trip recently, and I was showing my fiance some of my more favorite episodes, and her favorite game is Ocarina of Time, so she really liked that episode, and Nolan getting upset. But
Even though we were all happy, I was still found a way to
he's
get
mad.
upset.
We even dared to say one, slightly negative thing
Not in
about
my
it.
house.
All right, Jordan, you could have selected any game that we haven't played that is 15 years old or older, and you selected Final Fantasy X, the 10th installment in the Final Fantasy franchise, main installment. Why?
All right, so I'll try to keep it as short as possible because I've thought about this all week as to how I'm actually going to say this. So when I was, I don't know, maybe 10, I went over to my friend's house, and he was playing Final Fantasy X, and he was, I don't know, somewhere in the middle. I think he was fighting like a Seymour fight. He was stuck on it. And I was watching it, and I was kind of intrigued. I was like, this actually looks pretty fun. So for Christmas that year, I asked for just one thing, which was Final Fantasy X. And up until then, I had never beaten a game. I had never, you're 10, so your attention span's kind of small. So I didn't really beat a game. And Final Fantasy X is the first game that ever captured me enough that I actually sat down through the whole thing and beat it. The second reason is around this time, I think it was around the same Christmas. No, it was a little bit before. Maybe it was the Christmas before. We had a cat named Sammy. My mom actually got a cat. It was her own Christmas present for herself, I guess you could say. She had got him, I think, I can't remember how long before that she got him. But anyway, this cat would sit beside me all the time, like while I played video games. So he actually watched me beat Final Fantasy X. 2 months ago, this cat passed away. He was 23 when he passed away.
Whoa.
And
Wow.
yes, he was 23. So I'm 28 now. The cat, when we got him, my mom got him from a shelter. He was a couple years old when she got him, we believe. He was give or take 23. He was somewhere in that range. So he was an old cat. He passed away about 2 months ago. So my lifelong companion, Sammy, passed away.
Oh.
And I got to thinking about it. I was just like, what's some way I could, like, I don't know, honor him in some way. So my cat was very, he always wanted it his way, you could say. Like, he was kind of, you would pick him up to put him on the faucet. He wouldn't drink from the water bowl. He needed it his way. And I was just like, what better way to honor his memory than to force a bunch of people on a podcast to play the first game he ever watched me play and beat,
What?
I
So
should say.
perfect.
Sammy
World.
was his name?
Sammy.
Rest in peace, Sammy. That's a great. That's old. That's an old cat.
He was so I'm 28. I think we got him. I don't know. It was a couple months, I want to say, before I got Final Fantasy X as a game. My mom just randomly got him. So yeah, Sammy, my cat. He watched me play just about everything.
Well, this episode is dedicated to you, Sammy.
Yeah. for real.
What a true companion in a game that is all about companions. Kenny, you want to tell us a little bit about it?
Overview.
Final Fantasy X is a JRPG that I would imagine people are kind of familiar with. Some people have heard of this series. One or two of you listening to our show may be familiar. This was a 2001 PS2 title that was, from Square and the folks that do the Final Fantasy series. Notable for a lot of reasons, partly for its super popular in-game mini-game, Blitzball, which I'm thinking about going pro-end, by the way.
You look like a
Like
Blitzball
in real life.
player. Yeah.
And also a little bit of a pivot in the Final Fantasy series as well, because it's the first with fully three-dimensional areas, a shift away from active time battle to something called conditional turn-based battle, as well as a very loved, I think for the most part, maybe outside of Final Fantasy's magic system, one of the most beloved Final Fantasy magic systems with the sphere grid, and just generally one of the kind of iconic, popular Final Fantasy titles. You find yourself playing Titus, like me, a professional baller.
Can I stop you right there?
Sure.
One, you're not, but two, unfortunately, and I know that Jordan knows this, the proper pronunciation of his name is Titus.
It is not.
Jordan?
That's
It is.
not.
So yeah, the voice actor for Titus actually has his own YouTube channel. He confirms it on that YouTube channel that it is Titus. Also, in one of the Kingdom Hearts games, they pronounce it as Titus in game.
Yeah, Nolan, you should know this
Oh no.
from Kingdom Hearts.
I'm not going
I
to
am
call him that in
Oh
this
no,
episode.
I'm not either.
Okay.
Wildly uncomfortable with this fact. I'm not disputing it.
Titus.
Titus.
Yeah, but just
Cletus.
Okay, now can we for this episode just agree? And Jordan, you can do whatever. You're our guest, but can we just call him Titus because that is so
That
much
is-
righter.
They never actually say his. They never actually say his name in 10,
In the
which is kind
game.
of unique. Yeah. So
That's weird.
it was kind of up to fan interpretation when it first came out. So a lot of people
that-
still call him Titus.
that silent protagonist, but that talks a bunch.
Yeah. His name is never actually spoken in the
Right.
game.
Yeah, it's because you can change it, and so they
Right.
rely.
No.
Give you the option to customize.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they
Oh,
do. That I think that
Him.
I think maybe him, and then the Aeons, but no other characters, which you do historically in other games. But because this one is fully voice acted, which that is another new thing to the franchise. They don't have the character say Titus's name because I think that you can change his name.
Yeah.
When do you think games are gonna let you do that, where you do a custom name, but then it like inserts it for
Fallout 4.
Oh, Fallout 4, yeah.
you? Okay, like I knew
Oh,
it was
yeah.
probably a thing or coming soon. Like it seems totally
Like,
doable.
it
really
won't
cool.
say pee pee poo poo, I don't think, but like if you
It will
put
say
in
a few weird things.
common
though.
names, yeah, it'll say it. It'll
Yeah, I
like,
think
crazy.
it's like over 1,000 names, I think I read, or
Yeah.
more than
Oh,
that
interesting.
even. Yeah.
Cool. I'm waiting for the non-pre-recorded version where it will
where it
I
will
don't
say
know.
pee pee
It's
poo poo.
tricky. This is
All right.
not what this episode's about.
Moving along, because we have played other Final Fantasy games on this podcast.
Yes. Yeah.
Can y'all? A lot of them actually.
Yeah. I can name
Y'all
all
have
of
any
them.
No, you
One,
can't.
Watch. Final Fantasy 1, Final Fantasy 4, Final Fantasy 7, Final Fantasy
8,
8, Final Fantasy 10, Final Fantasy Adventure, Final Fantasy Yo
Tactics.
Mama, and
Not
Final
Yo Mama.
finally
14 off the show because
Final
no one's into
Y'all
that
are
these days.
y'all are jumping off the rails. Y'all were
won.
going well. No, you
We
missed
got them
one.
all.
I missed
Dude.
one.
Y'all both
missed
missed
two.
one.
I missed two.
two.
Jordan knows.
No, y'all missed one, and it is two.
We play Final Fantasy 2?
Oh,
Yes,
Well,
Whoa.
you played the GBA version.
Final Fantasy II: Dawn of Souls
Okay.
with Antonin.
Fine.
Okay, Kenny, he's getting a kick out of 2 and 1, whatever.
really
So,
funny.
yeah,
Get it together,
misunderstanding.
Titus.
A lot of Final Fantasies on this podcast.
Yeah. Is this one of the most well-known Final Fantasies? Why do I think it is? I feel like everyone talks about 10. Maybe okay, 7. 7's the
Right.
most well-known, like for sure. But 10, I feel like, is the next in line of people's like most famous Final Fantasies.
Feels pretty accurate to me.
Well, I think it was another leap into modernization. 9 is great. I can't wait till we play that. I have a
Yeah.
fondness for 9. It's wonderful.
too.
But 7 took it to a whole new level, and then 10 really modernized it with voice acting. And we'll talk about a lot of these things, but with the cutscenes that still hold up to today on a
Yeah.
lot of them, the music, and then the gameplay. Like it's somewhat of a revolutionary Final Fantasy title that I think even modern Final Fantasy titles still learn from and build from.
And it being on PS2, I think, also
that helps. for
helped
sure.
that. Yeah, because more people had consoles.
On that note, I think I've actually had this discussion. I think 10 is so well known by a lot of people because it came out in late 2001. I think it was like December 2001. Name a game in 2001 on any console that looks better than this. It's hard. It's hard, and
Yeah.
a lot of if you're young, people care about graphics back then, and even
Oh,
today, a lot of
big
people
time.
care about graphics. So this game looking as good as it did, I think had a lot for it.
Yeah, for sure. Story, Kenny, without spoiling anything.
Oh my
I mean,
goodness!
I'll
How do you even?
just set it up.
Sure.
Your boy T is playing around a blitzball. I can't. I won't do it.
Say
Titus.
Titus.
I
Your
fucking-
boy
But
T.
then I feel wrong because I know I'm wrong now too.
Okay.
All right.
Regardless, our protagonist finds himself playing a game of blitzball as he does when when everything hits the fan. We'll just we'll say it that way. Sin shows up, this giant creature, and just wreaks havoc, destroys everything. It's a really epic scene. And then he immediately gets sucked into this crazy portal after meeting Auron and this mysterious little person, and finds himself 1,000 years in the future in a world where his home country has already been destroyed, and the adventure goes on from there with a lot of weirdly inserted blitzball right from the very beginning.
That's a good setup.
Yeah, the opening scene, other than there's very few games that I would say the opening scene is just better. The opening, like the blitzball scene at the beginning, is pretty iconic for a lot of people.
Good.
Oh yeah.
You've got Final Fantasy VII with the whole coming in on the train, Aerith down there praying. Like, that's a really epic thing with the title, Midgar. But yeah, Final Fantasy X rivals that for sure. I don't think there's any other Final Fantasies that does it as well as those two.
14.
No. No.
14 does have, well, depending on the opening cinematic, 14 cinematics are good, but
But not as good.
Not as good.
Gameplay.
Kenny's first play
Yeah.
is fine. He did great, but it's difficult.
Just fine.
You did well. No,
You did it your
but
way.
Listen, Final Fantasy, no, JRPGs are difficult to do first plays of, especially as they get
Yes.
newer and newer because they're so story heavy up front.
It's like a 3-hour long cinematic cutscene that could just be released to theaters and it would be its own thing. And you're supposed to sit through that and then somehow have content to add on top of it? No. It's
While
hard.
talking over it, while it's voice acted, it's difficult.
Yes.
Kenny did a great job with it. However, in his very few battles that he got to fight in, he nearly died. I just don't understand how in every first play that he does, he manages to find a way to die or almost
Including Nancy Drew mystery
die.
mall.
Nancy Drew Mystery Train.
Like,
You guys
Kenny.
will never give me a hard time about
of
Nancy
course
Drew.
not. It's classic.
Because you're still dying. What are you doing?
I didn't die. This random stranger I met who was suddenly fighting with me died. But then
Aaron?
he hopped up right after the battle and was okay, so it obviously wasn't a big deal.
You were so close to game overing in the first play, which is so
Tutorial.
difficult to do.
I know games and I know my limits,
Oh,
and I just took it
please.
right to the edge because that's how I live my life.
No, that is incorrect and false. But you did survive. You made it through the first play. We all got to experience together the opening cutscenes, the destruction of Xanarkand, the first few battles, Titus pairing up with Aaron, and then I don't know if in your first play we got that mysterious girl, but we're going to talk about her in the duration of this podcast, so we're going to have to say names at some point. But we got to experience a lot up front, and it really is such a good introduction into the world without having tons of reading that bogs you down and slows down the pacing.
Yes. And I'm wondering, I'm like thinking of other JRPGs. The most recent one that comes to mind for me, because I did the first play, was Grandia. And that I had to edit like crazy. And Kenny obviously had to edit too. But in this game, I do feel like they let you loose earlier and do a really good job of teaching that quickly. Because like the focus with all of these games is more so on the story and the pacing. And this is such a cinematic experience that it just kind of throws you in there. I think this game does a great job of that. It's very accessible in that regard.
They teach you about the limit breaks that aren't limit breaks anymore right away. Overdrives.
Overdrives, they're limit breaks.
Yeah, they're just not called limit breaks, but that's absolutely what they are. They soon after, in some of the other early battles, not that very first one, but they teach you about sort of magic system and, choosing elements based on elemental stuff. They do a really good job of kind of introducing you to the differences here of how the battle stuff flows. Because some of it feels very familiar, but some of it's relatively new, at least if you have only played up to this point.
Sure. And one of the big things is the battle system.
Mm-hmm.
It goes from this ATB turn-based battle system to this newly revised battle system where you can at any time switch out a party member with party members that are on the back line, because you've got 3 party members active at any time typically, and then you can switch in with any of your other reserves at any time that you're active, and then each of your characters have a rock, paper, scissors kind of relationship with the enemies that you're fighting. There's some enemies that have elemental weaknesses that your mage, Lulu, will do best on, your black mage. There's some that have a harder exterior, so Aaron typically will be able to pierce through that armor, and so you bring him in. There's some flying enemies that are very difficult to hit with most of your teammates, so you bring in Waka Waka, and Waka can throw his Blitzball as an attack. Like, it's a very, like, more than most Final Fantasies, a rock, paper, scissors and encouragement to utilize all of your characters. Jordan, when you came to Final Fantasy X, I guess this was your first Final Fantasy, is that what you said?
It's the first one I beat. I believe the first one I ever played was 4, the original
Okay.
SNES 4. Yeah.
So then when coming to 10, you at least knew, hey, this is different than 4. What did you think, and what do you think even today about this kind of new revised battle system that they're working with here in Final Fantasy X?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of turn-based combat. That's kind of just where I like ARPG, but turn-based is just kind of what I grew up with, so it's, I kind of just stick with it. But I think it's called the conditional turn-based combat, having that where, like you said, it's like a rock paper scissors system, and each character having something good, like something they can do against an enemy that is just like, it's just very, how do I word it? I don't know. Like Lulu with her elements, Waka with flying and whatnot. Waka's also probably the best use in the game because of his silence, his dark, his sleep that he can inflict and whatnot.
Sure.
But growing up playing it, I really liked that combat system. It was very simple, but when you get down to the nitty gritty of it, it gets very complex, especially at end game if you're fighting like optional bosses and whatnot. So still to this day, it's probably one of, if not my favorite combat systems in a lot of RPGs.
I'll say this about it. Coming from other Final Fantasies or looking at newer ones like 13, 12, 15, they always change the battle system in some major way. This change was very different, but not so dramatic that it was so felt that you're like, I gotta get used to this. To me, it almost feels like ATB in a sense. There's a lot more going on underneath. I just think that this transition from like old school to like this new battle system was not done in a negative way. Like they did a really good job of it feeling good.
Feels like where the series had been going.
I always said that to me the combat system feels like a mesh between Final Fantasies 1 through 3 because it's just traditional turn-based, mixed with the job change system of Final Fantasy 5, where you have the traditional turn-based, but then everyone kind of has their unique role and you can bring them in at any time. You just, instead of job changing outside of combat, you kind of do it inside of combat. It's kind of what I've always thought of it as, is like a mesh between 1 through 3 and 5.
It feels good.
Totally see that.
Yeah, it feels very good.
It does feel good. We're talking about them in battle. Let's talk about them outside of battle. Final Fantasy after 1 is very character driven, story rich in relation to these characters, especially in Final Fantasy X here. You get a lot of time with a lot of characters and you get to delve into some of their stories, and a lot of these characters individually evolve. So if you're watching on video, you can look at Jordan's shirt and he's got the full team right there.
Such a sick
from
shirt.
left to right, we've got Kamari, or from my left to right, we've got Kamari, Waka, Auron, Titus, Yuna, Lulu, and Riku there on the shirt, which is, by the way, okay, I didn't even say, I played Final Fantasy X when it came out back in 2001.
Yes.
And excellent, right? I haven't played it since then.
Oh.
I haven't played it extensively since
Yeah.
then. So coming back to it, there's a whole new feeling and understanding of story and characters and stuff like that, which is super interesting. We don't have even all the time to talk about that extensively in this podcast, but it was interesting playing this week because some of my favorite characters from the past are no longer my favorite characters because they maybe annoy me or whatever. So my question that I'm coming to you guys with is, who was one of your favorite characters from the cast, and why? I'll start since I'm already talking. Like, I used to really like Riku, and I don't hate her, but she annoyed me this week. Like, a lot of people say that Titus whines, but I don't get that at all. Like,
oh, he does.
And I really don't get that. And if he does at all, okay. He's been taken away from his family and his whole country has been destroyed. I think it's okay. Riku is the whiny, annoying one to me in this one, although I still think she's cute. I love you, Riku. But
she's listening.
The thing that hasn't changed is that I used to and still do think Auron is amazing. And I think he's such a bowler, and I love his story, and then I love using him in battle as well. So that's my favorite.
Yes. Mine is Yuna. Because you said earlier in that like top 10 segment, people say there's an argument that she's the main character. No, but I do think that her epic moments, her highlights in the story are the highest and the coolest. Like some of my favorite cutscenes ever in Final Fantasy feature Yuna as like the main character, and I think like just her whole internal battle and quest I think is just so interesting and drives the story. It's Yuna.
All right, Kenny.
Yeah, I also really like Yuna, so I won't dwell on that, and I'll instead answer the question kind of like you did and tell you who bugs me, because that's more interesting. I can't stand Waka.
Well, no one can. I mean,
He's the absolute worst thing.
it's just the way he talks, Kenny. He's not that
Are you
bad.
talking? Yeah. Are you talking about like the shallow things? Or are you talking about the deeper things? Because he's kind of like a rub against the party because of his like theological persuasions during the game.
All of
Everything.
the reasons. His face and his heart, and mostly the fact that he throws a ball and
Punchable
acts
face?
like,
face.
what? It's so dumb to me. I don't like put Blitzball as a sweet mini game. Have combat. There doesn't need to be weird overlap here, and I don't like him.
All right, Jordan, who's your favorite?
So growing up, it was also Orin for reasons everyone has pretty much stated. I mean, he is what he is. Obviously, I'm not going to dwell on that. As I've gotten a little older, a lot of people don't like using him at all. They don't think he's like, they don't care. I'm actually a really big Kimahri fan.
Ooh,
Yeah.
so cool.
I think in the I read something that in the whole game he's got like 150 something lines, which is less than what Tidus speaks before he even gets to like Baj Temple.
That's a good fun fact.
I won't spoil anything, but he has a moment kind of in the middle of the game against a certain boss that I really respect and like. And I've always, I don't know, like I said, growing up it was Orin. As I've gotten older, I've leaned towards Kimahri.
I want to like Kimahri more. He's a really cool character design, and Blue Mage is always fun. He just in battle, he kind of doesn't hold up to the rest of the crew.
He is very underwhelming. I've typically taken him down to Orin's side of the sphere grid, which we haven't even talked about that yet, but we will.
We should.
Yeah, we need to. We will. But this playthrough, I did something kind of unique. I took him down Lulu's side. I don't typically do that. Him as a black mage is actually kind of broken because he gets a spear early in the game that has a magic plus 20% increase, and he was actually hitting way harder than Lulu early.
Hold on.
Okay.
The fact that we can even talk like that about character building in a Final Fantasy game is so important.
Right.
Yes.
So let's do that.
Wild.
Because leading up to Final Fantasy VII, you have got a fairly traditional leveling system when it comes to JRPG. Final Fantasy VII adds in materia, so that takes it to a different level, and it's very interesting because there's a lot of combinations that you can do there that not only affect your stats, but when combined together, do some pretty unique and really cool things. And then 8 has the worst draw system ever. 9 has a very simplistic system that's just okay. But then 10 has a sphere grid. Has this massive... How many nodes are on that thing? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
All of them.
I don't know.
They literally went out and found all of the
nodes. Yeah, I think it's 500 something.
They put them in there.
That's crazy.
I've always joked that Path of Exile stole this.
Well,
absolutely.
No, they've admitted that they used this.
Have they?
Like,
yes,
Chris Wilson's been like, Final Fantasy X's sphere grid was inspiration for our skill tree.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's amazing.
So, very quickly, 828 nodes, not 500. There's 828 nodes on the grid, but each of your characters start in a location that is strategically built out by the creators so that they are fulfilling a certain role, right? Kimahri Blue Mage, Lulu Black Mage. We've already kind of talked about some of these. Kimahri's is interesting in that you can kind of, his is relatively small, and then you can kind of choose which path that you branch him out on. That's what Jordan was talking about. Yeah. But they each have these nodes that you can activate by these spheres that you collect in battle and build up your characters. This is, honestly, I think it is my favorite my favorite leveling system in the franchise. Even, I mean, 7 is close, but 10 I think is my favorite. What did you guys think of the sphere grid? Is it overwhelming? Does it make sense? What did you think, Kenny?
Absolutely love it. The concept's great. It's not a surprise that I love it. I'm with Nolan on, being a big fan of PoE and customization and options. I think you should give that to people. They do a good job of introducing you to it and not letting it be overwhelming. They do a good job of making it somewhat meaningful. There's certainly optimizations, but as long as you're making choices that sort of make sense, you can kind of do what you want and make it work no matter, what your preference is, which is respectable. It'd be easy to make certain paths kind of the only viable or easy paths, and then the option on top of all of that to also go back and play the game in expert mode, where your node starting restrictions are changed and you have even more versatility to kind of build characters how you want. Holy cow, they absolutely nailed it here.
Nolan,
Yeah.
did you like it?
Oh, yeah. I think this is the defining factor for this game. I think it's why it's so popular and like why we'll get to aged. But yes, I love Path of Exile. So going back to this again, which is the original, felt natural. The fact that all 4 of us can build our characters different, which, like you said, in Final Fantasy, they build the character for you and they hand them to you. And they do a good job. It feels good. The classes feel specific and do what they're supposed to do. But just having that option of replayability here, I absolutely adore. I always love the choice and the customization factor, and so it's so good. So good.
Yeah. All right, Jordan, what did you think?
Yeah, the sphere grid, as a kid, it was pretty well, when you load it up, it's pretty overwhelming. Then you quickly realize it's kind of linear in a way until you get like the locks, the sphere locks, so that you can open up and branch out and whatnot. But when you're first starting out, unless you're doing there's 2 sphere grids. There's the standard and the expert. If you're first playing this game, I'd say you should do standard, obviously. But growing up and I still use the standard for the most part. And yeah, it is linear. It does look massive, and it is, but it does take you down just one path for each character minus Kamari. And later on, you can branch out.
Yeah. Like, I mean, you could build Titus to be a black mage. It'd be a bad idea, but because he doesn't have high magic stats, right? But I've heard of people trying that before. It's just interesting that you have. It's guided, it's linear to some degree, but then you have flexibility to eventually do what you want to do with your characters for good or for bad.
I know it's a bad idea to build Titus that way, but I want the option because I want to watch someone like speed run it later in life and be like, I beat it with Titus as a black mage. Like, I want the option. I
think I saw a comment in Discord saying, I think it might have been Glenn, said he taught Titus the Aga spells, Lulu's kind of later spells, and obviously I don't think he would hit for hardly anything unless he had all the magic nodes.
Okay, listen. For sake of time, we can't do all of these, but do we want to talk Cloister of Trials, Blitzball, the linearity of the game, or the laughing scene? Like, we've got to pick one of those.
We have to talk about the laughing scene at some point.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about Blitzball.
We do have to talk about Blitzball. Let's do Blitzball first. There are multiple mini games in this game. A lot of them don't show up until later, but one of the earliest ones that do show up is Blitzball. And you're forced to play at least 1 or 2 games, but then you don't have to play the rest of the time if you don't want to. But if you want to, there is a whole career of a fictitious fantasy sport waiting for you.
I'm surprised they didn't make a spin-off sports game.
Unless they did.
They almost didn't have to because they gave you so much of it here.
That's true.
Dude, they should have. I think they could have capitalized on this. I know that people are split over this, but I have been, I guess, in the minority, and I have always loved the beautifully flawed game of Blitzball.
The beautifully flawed.
A good way of saying it.
Yeah.
Jordan, Blitzball, yay or nay?
I used to like it. I've gotten Waka's weapon enough that I'm kind of over it at this point.
Yeah. It is a long journey to get Waka's weapon, probably.
And I took the journey the first time I played the game. I wanted to get everything, and it's the worst. I disagree.
No!
It's the worst.
It's not.
getting Waka's weapon isn't the hardest part. I think you just have to win one tournament and then just go talk to a lady. It's his overdrives are also locked behind Blitzball, and
Yeah.
especially if you want to do post game, you can't skip them because there's one in particular that is almost required, and it's a grind.
Listen, Blitzball's the greatest. Kenny, like the reason why. So I've been playing for this for 2 weeks now. I'm about 75% of the way through the game, which is great. But I'm only just now about to get to the point where I've got flexibility to move around the map like I want to. So that's when Blitzball really becomes a thing, or it can, because you can go around, recruit NPCs to your team. I've got the strategy guide that came out with the game. I tried
cool.
to find it to have it here, and in the back they've got all of the stats at every level of all of the characters that you can pick up. So I remember back in the day building my team from what the level 99 stats would be on all these characters. I even have a list right here. I don't know if you can see, it's just a much smaller list, but it's of characters that I was going to pick up as soon as I came across them, and those are the ones that I found, and their location as well. So anyways, I love Blitzball.
You're a
No one does not.
You're a sports boy, first of all.
I'm
Second of all, the fact that they went there and like made it as robust as they did is really funny to me. Like, it could have been a very simple, straightforward minigame, but they gave stats to like NPCs you could recruit. It's awesome.
So, do you have Keepa as one of your? A lot of people don't know this, but Keepa, who starts off on the Besaid Aurochs as the goalkeeper, I don't know what you would call him. He actually has the best shooting stat in the game at 99 for some reason.
Whoa.
Yeah, I'm not sure why. It's like
Okay.
level
Definitely
99.
didn't keep him. I'm trying to pick up Nimruk for my goalie. He's on the airship, but he plays for the for another team, so I have to wait until his contract expires.
You're a sports guy. You're ESPN.
The fact that there's that amount of depth is just absolutely crazy. They didn't have to do that. They chose to.
Yeah.
I haven't spent nearly as much time as some of you getting into this. I've liked Blitzball. The appeal is there. I could see myself playing a lot more of it. I will say the idea of the actual sport itself, like the concept of it, not the mini game, is one of the dumbest things I've ever seen in my life. Like, there's no way A, you're going to get a giant floating sphere of water, and B, that people are going to be able to throw stuff around and swim through it.
Okay.
No, I don't have to just suspend disbelief. I got to, like, wad it up and set it on fire and throw it out the window. It's too much.
No, stop. Because you're playing a video game where a whale-like creature named Sin is coming and destroying countries and transporting people thousands of years through time, and you don't like that there's a sport that's played in a water sphere.
That's accurate. I'm more okay with the weird, I don't know, theology of this game than I am how the sport works.
What I'm hearing is that Kenny also doesn't like Quidditch, is what I'm also hearing.
Yeah. Kenny's just against any fun in fantasy. He wants to keep it real.
No, Quidditch is also stupid, but
okay.
Get a life. I think with the rest of these things, with the linearity, even with the laughing scene and a few of the other things that I had previously mentioned, those can be aptly discussed in our next section on Aged.
Sure.
Aged.
My first experience with this game was the HD remake. Or
yeah.
Remaster.
Back in 2013.
Yeah, I got it for PlayStation 3, and I played it for the first time. And I don't know how I missed the first one on PlayStation 2, but this was one of the like early HD remasters. You know how that's like a thing now? This was like the one that
it wasn't a thing, really.
No, it wasn't. This was one of the ones that like kicked that off. And at the time I rolled my eyes like, make new games, quit reusing them. But I love HD remakes now, and I really enjoyed playing this game for the first time HD.
Speaks to the popularity of the game. The fact that it got a sequel, X2, speaks to the popularity of the game. The fact that it didn't just get re-released on, the original PlayStation, or remastered on PlayStation 3, but also came out on everything else. You could play it on the Switch and on Xbox One and on PS4 and on the PlayStation Vita and on Windows. Like, you can get this game if you want to get this game.
Yeah. Okay. This game has a lot of things new, and we've addressed some of those. One of the major things that is new in this game is the voice acting. It is fully voice acted. It gets a bad rap when it comes to people looking back on it in 2021, and I think unfairly, because I think the voices are spot on. I think the mouth movements are not, but I don't think that's a problem with the original game. I think that's with the translation. When you try to sync English dubbing to Japanese mouth movements, it's going to be horrendous, and it is, and it was. But I think the voice acting, cheesy at times, over the top at times, but I think it worked, especially for the first one in the series to do it.
Yes.
Yeah, when you go back and look at games that were made in this era, very little, not many games had good voice acting, so to say. This one was pretty stellar for its time, and it's somewhat cringy now to listen to, but it still holds up, I think, well enough.
I think a lot of issues people take with it, Dustin, is Titus's voice.
Yes.
And what I'm like, what? He's an annoying teenager. Like, they want him to be Cloud Strife or someone cooler with a deeper voice, or like that's not annoying and doesn't say cringy stuff, but he's a kid. And it's accurate with who he is as a kid. So maybe they just don't like the main character.
Yeah, maybe. Because I think the voice acting, I can understand if that's the thing, if they think Titus is annoying, but
yeah, he's nasally.
Man,
yeah, whatever.
The amount of voice of lines like recorded, NPCs for the most part are talking. All of your your enemies, like there's very few lines of dialogue that are just on via text, because they spent so much effort, even just in the English dubs, right? Like making that quality enough of an experience to listen to. And again, being the very first one to do that in this franchise, I think it was remarkably done. It led to scenes like the laughing scene that is notoriously remembered, and I think incorrectly so, because it is taken out of context, and people look back on it, thinking that it is cheesy and overdone, missing the fact that that is exactly what that moment is in the game.
It's a translation problem, I think, because I know why they might make fun of it and laugh at it. I mean, I get it, and especially out of context, you're like, seriously. It just goes on for a long time, and I mean, that's what I think is funny about it. But I also think probably in the Japanese version, it wouldn't even be a question. They'd be like, what laugh scene? Just because, I don't know. I think that's hard to do.
I even disagree with that. I know what you're saying, but in playing this game, the story is so robust here, but it's one of the first times that Titus and Yuna are being able to kind of have peace and talk amongst one another, and they're both understanding the gravity of their mission that they're on, and so they're both fake laughing, forcing themselves to laugh. They're like, come on, try to laugh. And so it's supposed to be bad. It's supposed to be cringy because they aren't really laughing, and then their fakeness of it causes them to really laugh. Yes, it goes on probably too long, but I think it makes sense in context. Jordan, looking back on it in 2021, does it make sense to you, or is it cringy? Do you agree with people that think it's, embarrassing, or what are your feelings?
I think a lot of the memes, whatnot, that goes on about it is probably from a lot of people that might not have even played the game or played it once, maybe back, when it first came out, and then like that's one of the more popular things they remember from it. However, if you listen to the Japanese voice acting, there is a similar cringe laugh that actually happens in that scene as well. It was wrote to be like that. That's how it was wrote. And James Arnold Taylor, who is a very well-known voice actor, is actually the voice actor for Titus, and he also confirms that that's just how it's wrote. That's how it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it gets a bad rap for bad reasons. So, musically... Final Fantasy is known for its music, but Final Fantasy X might be the pinnacle performance of the franchise.
I agree. I think they're all good, but this one, especially some of the more notable tracks of during like Ascending and like Seymour's theme, like the different versions of Seymour's theme are so good. So good. And the orchestra versions, like the live versions too, I want to go so bad. It's masterful. It's insane.
Some of the like classic songs rehashed, especially in the early part of the game, are a little bit too early 2000s for me.
Like
And
that
they're
metal
kind of
stuff. I know you.
reimagining. Yeah, absolutely.
that
Like
out.
I felt like they were a little heavy-handed on just like what was really cool then, and I don't think that specific piece aged super well. But everything else, I would fully agree. Pretty masterful. I think it's worth noting that this is a little bit of a deviation on who worked on the music. This is the first game in the main series that wasn't completely scored. But I'm gonna butcher names like we always do, and I'm sorry if you're listening. By Nobuo Uematsu.
No, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it wasn't terrible, and so instead they had a couple of people all work on this game, which is great. And you've got to with the scope of what you're trying to do here.
Well, and I think this is the first one where he's passing it off to his team, so he's not completely removed from the project, from my understanding.
No.
And
It's more people involved.
yeah, and it's not really like pass the torch in such an epic way, because you would not be able to know or tell the difference.
Yeah, the Padawans.
I'm not saying that as a negative, almost as an evolution.
Yeah. Right,
because
right.
This game it swung for the fences, but they knew they were, and they threw the resources into it too. When you change to that amount of 3D work in a game, and you're where the PlayStation 2 is and trying to get the visuals that they shot for. When you do the music that you're trying to do and you voice act the whole thing, you've got to have a huge group of people working on this and committed to it. And so this one was a big investment for them. They spent the equivalent of like $50 million today in getting this game out and to market. And it shows that they really leaned into this series.
Xanarkin theme can't be beaten. It's one, like honestly top one Final Fantasy song. top three for sure. Top three for sure. I just think Final Fantasy X has some of the most moving tracks, which really work in some of the more moving scenes.
Yep.
Just man, Nolan, we've talked about it many times before, but that ending sequence of scenes, it's just some of the most moving moments in all of Final Fantasy.
I think it's one of the best endings in Final Fantasy. Like, that's the other thing about this game that is just so good today in 2021. It's so cinematic. The cutscenes are incredible.
Ahead of its time.
Way ahead of its time. PlayStation 2, like, we're getting into that more, like, realistic style of cutscene, but oh my gosh, the ending cutscene, dude. The high five. Well, spoilers. The high five.
Know,
but oh my gosh.
You can just say that, right?
Jordan, we're all fanboying really hard about how this thing looked and sounded. You picked it. What are some highlights for you on like look at this game, how it aged? Where is it at in your heart?
So I brought it up earlier. I can't think of a game in 2001 or even like maybe even a few years after that looks and sounds as good as this one. Like, I'm sure there's some, I'm sure there's something I missed, but there's very few, and like, that just speaks for Square as a company, really, and how talented they are. 2001, I mean, what games were coming out in 2001 that looked like this, that sounded like this, that had cinematics like this? It's just massively impressive to me how well it holds up, especially the cinematics today. You could argue like the other cutscenes where that aren't cinematic, where it is a little awkward at times, but like the cinematics themselves just look, I mean, you could take it and put it as like an animated film and it would look fantastic.
Yeah, like if you watched them all on YouTube, which I did, back to back, it feels like a movie. It's crazy.
Let's talk just, I think we've got to, for just a second, about the linearity of this game, especially up front, because a lot of people play RPGs so that they can roam around and do whatever they want to, and you can't do that for the longest time in this game.
Yeah.
And I know that caused a lot of people. Final Fantasy 13 gets a bad rap for the hallways and for the linearity, but I think it really started here.
It does.
Thank you.
It does. Which I don't care about one iota. because that's not what I'm looking for in Final Fantasy. I'm looking for an epic story and great characters. But I know a lot of people are looking for something else. And so does that make it difficult to come back to in 2021 since you can't do your own thing?
I miss it a little bit just because I kind of lean that way. You know, I want to roam around the overworld and kind of have that sort of full exploration. But for this game and what it's doing and how it's trying to tell this story, it totally makes sense as a choice to me. So I'm perfectly fine with them doing it, and it makes great sense. I don't have a problem with it. Personal preference is for a little bit more of that kind of open style game, but it totally works here.
Just in relation to compare to a game we played in the past and a lot of people know about, Final Fantasy VII, you play 3 hours or so of Midgar, and then, or somewhere maybe around there, and then you've kind of got somewhat of an open world, and then and then here it's 30 hours until you kind of get into an open world. So it's very different.
And to answer your original question, it's totally fine, and it's not hard to come back to because our definition in 2021 of open world has changed so much from when this game came out, when everyone was complaining about linearity, or even in when 13 came out. We have open world games. You can satisfy that itch other ways. This is a storytelling experience, and linearity didn't even come into my mind in 13. When I read that people were complaining about that, I was like, what are you talking about? This was in 10 to a degree. This is in other Final Fantasies as well. I think it's so easy and fine and not even noticeable.
To some degree, you alluded to this, Dustin, but to some degree, I think the open world in Final Fantasy altogether is a little bit of a myth even. It's not. Some of the games are different.
No, I'm with you.
I'm with you, dude.
If you want to look at one, you have this open world, but you're phased through all of the pieces of it very intentionally. You don't get the airship right away. You have things you can go to, and then you have next areas. Sure, you can explore them, open, but that are limited that you can go to, and you're unlocking things, and it's moving all forward kind of, in one direction, sort of at a time. So it's fine. It's a Final Fantasy game and it works.
Jordan.
Yes.
Coming to you in regards to the linearity.
Yeah, I can see where people, because if you go to 13, I think the difference between 13 and 10, I'm just using those two as an example. There's more that are like this. 13 gets the what do they call it? Hallway simulator is what they like to call it. I think that's because there's very little to do in that game other than run forward and fight. Later on, you can do the monster catching or the monster the hunts or whatever in 13. But in 10, there's a lot of side stuff you can do. Actually, you can fight what's her name, Lady Belgamine on the roads. You can do Blitzball. There's the random mini games. They can be hit or miss, but it's something to do. It is linear, which is intentional. If you go back to the directors, they purposely made it linear, and because they wanted it to be a storytelling experience and whatnot. Also, going to PS2 hardware, that was probably growing pains for them. So just keeping it linear might have been easier as well. Is my thoughts.
True. I don't have any problem with it, but I don't know if you guys have heard, but there's other games in the series. So Final Fantasy X is actually Final Fantasy X, and there's 9 before it in the main line and many after it, and other smaller games too. So you can find other games in the Final Fantasy franchise if you want to. This game on the PlayStation you can get for $5 used, super easy, right? Or $305 new. Pretty up there if you want a new non-HD remaster original version.
Yeah, that's expensive.
Popular game.
Or you can pay, $20 or $30 and play it HD remaster along with X2, right? It's X and X2 on your Switch PC. Kenny mentioned it's on everything, so very accessible to play today.
Yeah.
Final thoughts.
Here at the end of our episode, we'd love to give our conclusory summary thoughts on this game. We'll let Jordan have the final word. We're going to begin with Kenny because he likes to go first and share his unfiltered, unadulterated, unacceptable opinions. So go ahead and share what your final thoughts were on Final Fantasy X.
Yeah, this is one I've watched in the past but never played until this week. absolutely loved what I did get through, though it's a monster of a game, and so this is certainly one that I think, at least as far as I know, lives up to its pretty high reputation, and one I certainly plan to go back and get all the way through at some point. It's in my kind of must complete / catch up through gaming backlog list. So super glad that we had the excuse to kind of bump it into that location, because it was always on my radar, but not like prominently there. So had a great time with it.
Nolino?
2001, I think for a lot of people, this game was their first exposure to Final Fantasy. I'm thinking back, for me, I think this was the first one. I was like, what's Final Fantasy? And then I discovered 7, and then I found out there was a huge series. And I'm speaking from a US audience, but like 2001, I think is such a pivotal moment in the series, in this game on the PlayStation 2, very popular console, really defined where they were going to be going in the next decade. This game does so many things that we've discussed perfectly. They still pull from it. I can still go back and play it. It's so enjoyable. I think the HD release is such a smart move too, and I would probably recommend checking that one out. That was the first one I played, and it's so good. So I love this game. I think it's so masterful.
Played Final Fantasy X back in 2001, 2002 when it first came out. Got it on release. Remember reading the handbook, the manual, on the ride home, just to prepare for the game, and remember absolutely falling in love. It has historically been my second favorite Final Fantasy game of all time, of all the mainline ones at least. And so this week, or the last couple of weeks, honestly, I've been playing Final Fantasy X, the HD remake, because I've never played that before. And think that they've done a phenomenal job just touching up the graphics a little bit. There's even the option of not having the original soundtrack, but a more recent rendition of it, which, fans like or dislike, but I think it's faithful and solid. I just think there's so much here to love. The story presents itself as somewhat light, as opposed to Final Fantasy VII, dark, gritty. This one's a little bit lighter. The environments are a little bit more like islandy, and it's just but the story goes to some deep places, and the themes go to some deep places. And I still think I'm going to finish it within the next couple of days. It's one of those games where you can put in 40 hours and beat the game, or you can put in 200 hours and complete the game, like legitimately. And so I'm going to continue to play it and beat it this week, because like I said, I've gotten about 75% of the way through, and I think it's going to keep its spot all these years later as second in my list of favorite Final Fantasies. It's a wonderful, wonderful game that was so ahead of its time in 2001. Jordan, you're our guest, you're our director. Thank you for bringing Final Fantasy X to the table. What are your concluding thoughts on the game?
So I've been also thinking about this all week, how I'm going to word this. But like I said, this game is very important for kind of shaped who I become. It's the first game I ever beat. It's the first story that ever captivated me enough that I wanted to experience it through to the end. And I think that's what holds up so well is the story. You can make a case, the linearity might not be for everybody. Obviously the mini games and completing the game can be challenging, and the mini games in particular can be probably some of the worst in the series. But all that aside, if you just play this game for just the story and just go through the story, that's what you're playing this for, is how well put together, how amazing the story is, how certain scenes can still bring out emotional response in me, and I'm sure everyone else and a lot of other people and whatnot. All that, flaws and all, I'm fully aware of the flaws of what this game does wrong, what hasn't aged well, what has aged well. But the story is just the one thing that's just timeless to me.
Yeah.
So good.
Thank you for sharing Final Fantasy X with us this week. I know that it wasn't just us four that played. There were many in our community that did, many that wrote in. Before we get to that, I want to share with you the YouTube statistics. So don't freak out when I say 823 people voted on YouTube. 69% said yes,
Nice.
it's worth playing today. 8% said no, go play something else. And 23% have never played it before.
Final Fantasy fans are passionate, and so those 8% probably have thoughts.
Those 8% probably love 8. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So there are many people that wrote in. I wish that I could include them all because there's so many first time. There's so many of our friends that write in. I won't be able to include all of them. So, but thank you, like Captain Protein, Garlisle as always, Antonin. You are the Final Fantasy man, and you jumped ahead this week to play along with us. Clint, Cecil, there's Sky Serpent. There's so many of you that wrote in, but I'm only going to be able to include a few right now. We'll start with Donald, who said this game absolutely keeps up with the modern games of the genre. What starts as relatively linear gameplay for the series opens up into a rich world of secrets and puzzles. The end game side quests are in many ways just as memorable as some of the main story elements. Thinking of the Cactar Village, chocobo races, Blitzball, and hunting down the optional Aeons in particular. All in all, the in-game content adds double or arguably triple gameplay time with little repetition or tedious work. Tedious.
No.
Throw in the extra content put forth by the HD remaster and Steam achievements, and Final Fantasy X becomes a juggernaut of a game.
The Aeons, just real quickly, we didn't really talk about them. Summons, yeah, so epic in this game. Maybe some of the most epic they've ever done. Love them every time.
Well, big time tied to the story in this one, for sure.
Yeah, I love that part too. Yeah.
And only one person can summon them, which is super interesting. But by the way, guys, one of the Steam requirements, I don't remember what it's called, what the achievement is called, but you must max out the sphere grid.
Yep.
With each character.
That includes all the empty nodes as well.
With each
character.
Yeah.
I don't know about that one.
It's not okay.
I'm working on it right now, actually.
Jordan's gonna finish it.
Jess said, 2001 was a hard year for me. I was coming to terms with a lot of things personally, and gaming had fallen off my radar from the glory days of the NES and Sega. So when I did play this in 2001, I couldn't even get past the first mini-boss. It wasn't until 2004 that I met my now best friend, and he suggested an all-night game session with this Final Fantasy game he hadn't tried yet. We spent the next 24 hours beating it. To this day, we send memes of Titus to one another, reminisce about that night, and have been best friends for almost 20 years. This is probably the most important game to me, not only for those reasons, but also for the following. 1, the story. Any romantic will agree. 2, the music. The soundtrack rivals anything in gaming for me. 3, the characters. Each character brings something to the table. They all enhance the story and grow throughout. 4, the battle system, by far the most user-friendly and a great introduction to the genre. Easy to use, insane to master. There's so much I could talk about with this game, but this game will always be forever my favorite Final Fantasy, and if I'm being honest, probably my favorite game of all time. NGP forever.
An all-night session of this game sounds awesome. That's like easily doable.
Definitely binge playable.
Yeah.
And watchable, probably.
Yeah.
Kenny, you like to watch video games being played. You could watch this.
I absolutely would watch it played through again.
Kenny is Jordan's
cat.
cat.
The end of your play, Dustin.
Yeah. Finally, this is a first. Not just a first-time writer, but the first time that a fiance has written in.
What?
Mitha said, first-timer here. I started tuning in a few months ago when my fiance, Jordan, got me hooked while we were on a 9-hour road trip. Final Fantasy X was my first experience with the series, and I fell in love with them ever since. My favorite highlights of the game, music is at the top of the list. Tip my hat to Nobuo Uematsu. My favorite part is the kissing scene. Suteki Dane gives me goosebumps every time I hear it, and I'm so excited to have this play as our first dance song for our Final Fantasy themed wedding.
Yeah.
Oh, no way! That's cool.
It's gonna be epic.
The battle order system, trigger commands, which is a nice touch, and overdrives. It still has the most hype opening to practically any video game I've ever played. The cinematic for the games are phenomenal, even for the PS2 back in the day. Granted, there are some flaws, but whatever issues people have with the game won't overshadow my view on it. Final Fantasy X is still, to this day, a wonderful game, and I believe it's a great first game to get into NGP.
That kissing scene, games didn't do that then. It's very real.
In that water and with the fireflies, it's just untouchable.
Lifetime movie.
Hey, thank you, Smitha, and congratulations on your engagement
congrats.
and your soon-to-be wedding. We can't wait till you live stream it to our NGP community. And thank you to all of those that wrote in. There were many more that wrote in, and these were even abbreviated thoughts. You can see most of those in our commentary section on Discord. Join us there and submit your commentary each and every week. We'd love to include your thoughts as a part of our show next week. Guys, we are, for the first time in what feels like forever, truly randomizing from our retro master
It's
list.
about time. Kenny's gonna explode if we don't.
Yeah.
We are going back to the major point of our podcast, and we are going to randomly select the next retro game of the week. And it is we're going back to 1983.
Oh,
Whoa.
Wow.
On the Atari 2600.
Whoa, okay. Retro gaming podcast, huh?
Developed and published by Atari, 1983. The genre is a shoot 'em up,
Oh, so it's going to be one of your favorite games of all time.
but the game was the last in a series of children-friendly games.
What?
It's based on a recurring sketch from the then popular The Muppet Show. The game is called Pigs in Space, starring Miss Piggy.
You're trolling. Starring Miss Piggy, you added that.
We are being trolled.
I went back and forth there. It seemed old and I was disappointed. Muppets, though, got me hyped, and shoot 'em up, but then Miss Piggy themed kind of took the edge off it again.
Hold on. Super Mario Brothers, Super Metroid, Final Fantasy X, Miss Piggy?
And Pigs in
1983.
Space.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So pull out your Atari, find a copy. We've all got it. We've all got Pigs in Space.
Yes, I got pigs in a blanket. And
I'll pull my card out.
Everybody get your Pigs in Space. Oh my goodness, this next episode and the jokes that will most likely be made. Find a copy, play along with us, and next week we'll talk about Pigs in Space.
contribute to the memes in our Discord server. You can go to ngppodcast.com and click Join Us in Discord. There you can also leave your thoughts on games like Miss Piggy in Space. We'll see you there.
Kenny, hold on, because one of the games is Space Invaders clone called Chicken Invaders, where Captain Link Hogthrob fires sausages at egg-dropping chickens. Anyways, go ahead.
You're trolling.
I don't love this game too much.
Go ahead.
Some other people that might like this game too much. Our newest patron, William. Thanks for jumping on
Bill.
board. Not Bill, just William.
Bill.
And some new producer levels supporters. In fact, a couple of them, including some folks who have bumped their support up. Captain Protein. Thanks for keeping us healthy. Mr. Lattes. Thanks for keeping us unhealthy. Jordan, not to be confused with Jordan. Thanks for
Kenny, you're on a roll.
along. DB Muppet, which seems appropriately
Are you
named
troll-
considering our
I'm-
game of the week.
Y'all
so
are
you're
stupid.
welcome. and Brunt. So thanks for jumping up to the producer level as well.
Thank you.
Always thanks to our wonderful director level supporters, Bro Jim, Anthony, Garlisle, and of course, Jordan. Thank you so much for sharing this episode with us. Your time, your support, for sharing this podcast with your world and your fiance, and just we are glad that we've gotten to be a part of your life. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
As well as thanks to our giant list of current producers: Amarlian, Anthony, Austin, Ben, Bethany Fox, Carrie, Dan the Man, Francesca, Hi, I'm Josh, Joey, Justin, Corey, Lorelai, Maxima, Nawel, Secret Duck of Evermore, Shauna, Thomas, Unbelievable, Wardonis, William, Zion, and for this week only, honorary current producer status, Sammy.
Oh, I love it. You can follow us on our social media. That's Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. All of those links are in the show notes. Listen directly on any podcast provider of your choice. Make sure you subscribe so that you are the first to get new NGP episodes. And while you're at it, leave a kind rating and review. That's where you can find us. Jordan, do you want people to find you online? And if so, where?
Feel free to hit me up in Discord. I play Final Fantasy 14. I think I've mentioned that, and I play card games. Right now, I'm playing Gwent. If anyone cares. Yep. So, yep, that's it.
Toss a witch or a coin or something.
Something like
this,
that.
This episode was edited and produced by our good friend Tom Tate. Join us next week as we play Pigs in Space. Until then, I'm still Titus.
I'm still so mad about that whole thing.
That's good.
Thanks.
And that's Jordan. And this has been a Final Fantasy version of New Game Plus.